I am taking y'all to Saudi Arabia today. I was very interested in what Tamim was reading, the struggle from the 1920s. Was it between the king and his people, between secularism and fundamentalism, or just even like the ability to express religion? Very much the case in Saudi Arabia today. My book sort of takes that struggle and locates it in a police station and around the subject of a dead body. So I'm just going to read the first couple pages of my latest novel, Kingdom of Strangers. It's you'll see the struggle I'm talking about. My primary character in this scene is named Inspector Ibrahim Zahrani, and he is struggling in his department. He's a little more liberal-minded sort of person. The SUV hit the sand drift, skidded, and stopped in the middle of the road. The homicide team got out, 4 men in plain clothes, their shirts wrinkled, faces stung by the sun. Only one man had thought to bring a scarf for his head, the others made do with sunglasses. The local police pulled up behind them. The Bedouin who had found the corpse could see at once from the subtle way the men's bodies showed deference who was in charge. Lieutenant Colonel Inspector Ibrahim Zahrani did not introduce himself. The Bedouin approached him, anxiously recounting how his truck had jacked off the road, throwing one of his sheep out of the flatbed and forcing him to stop. When he'd gone to retrieve the sheep, he'd found the body. Everyone followed him over a rise in the sand. It was hard to tell at first whether it was a man or a woman. 5 sets of boots stopped in a semicircle around a mutilated face. The cheek and left eye had been ripped away, probably a bullet's exit wound, and the remaining skin was desiccated gray and coated with sand. From the tiniest sliver of black poking up from the collar, Ibrahim guessed she was female. His first thought was that some desert boy had shot his sister through the head for a crime that involved the family honor. Who else would bury someone way out here? Too far south to be Jeddah, this was a forgotten strip of sand 16 miles inland from the main road, which was not even a proper freeway itself. They'd gotten lost twice driving up here and had had to wait for the local police officer to come and get them. He gave the face another look. It was not a desert face. Even with all the destruction, you could see it was Asian. Ibrahim glanced at his watch, 1:30 p.m. If they were lucky, they could be done before the most infernal hours of the day. It was early autumn, really just an extension of summer. The heat was already clipping his thoughts like an impatient listener. The sheep were bleeding in the truck bed. Half the road was covered in sand. Just a few meters ahead of where they'd stopped the SUV, the road was impassable. Such an isolated spot. The drift might have gone unnoticed for weeks. Any idea if this happened recently? Ibrahim asked the Bedouin. Yeah, we had a windstorm last night, a bad one, certainly bad enough to blow a dune over the roadway. When he said dune, he motioned in the direction of the body. All Ibrahim could see was a great vista of sand broken here and there by outcroppings of rock. It took a loosening of perspective, some stiff stumbling back to the road, before he saw how the area around the body was slightly raised. He watched his men trample the crime scene and heard his junior officer, Wasim Dahak, admonish them. Go back to the street, you're stepping on evidence. No one listened, but they stood near him anyway, turned to him when he spoke, always eager. The sun beat down on them like licks from a blowtorch. When the cars finally arrived, they came funerary style, a procession of Red Crescent ambulances, the coroner's van, 2 Yukons with forensics teams. The local cop, Hatta, brought up the rear. Within minutes, the scene was a maelstrom of men. The forensics guys cordoned off the area around the body with long sticks and a swirl of blue tape. Ibrahim intervened. He wanted the whole dune sectioned off, so they expanded the area, pushing the men further back. 2 younger officers had arrived with a coroner, also named Ibrahim, but whom everybody called Abu Musa, the father of Musa. He was actually the father of Karim and should have been called Abu Karim. But at a coffee shop one afternoon, he had attempted to explain to Chief Inspector Riyad that Musa, which was the name of the prophet Moses, was also the genus classification name for bananas. And they were so named because Moses' mother had stuffed a banana into the baby's mouth before placing him in a reed basket and pushing him down the Nile. The banana was nutritious, but, more crucially, kept the baby quiet so that the Egyptians wouldn't kill him. Chief Riyad, unused to following such convoluted intersections of history and myth, simply sucked on his hookah and grunted. You know this how, Abu Musa? The name had stuck. Inspector Ibrahim had never worked with Abu Musa before, but the man's temper was legendary, as was his overbearing righteousness. Right now, Abu Musa was waiting for forensics to finish excavating the torso. 2 Red Crescent men moved in to help set up the vacuums that forensics would use to remove the sand, but Abu Musa shouted at them, "Get back from there. You don't touch her." "She's dead," one of the RC responders replied. "No one should touch her. Now get out of here." Abu Musa pushed the man aside. He wasn't worried that someone might disrupt the evidence. He was watching out for virtue crimes, a man touching a woman's body, defeating her honor even in death. The familiar crackling of tires on asphalt and a small explosion of dust announced the arrival of another SUV, this one carrying Detective Inspector Osama Ibrahim. Osama got out, surveyed the scene, and went straight to Ibrahim. The 2 men shook hands, and Osama offered an apology for not having welcomed him to the department before this. "Local trouble, you think?" he asked. "Maybe." Ibrahim studied the scene. "Is your coroner always so aggressive?" "Yeah, but only when female victims are involved. Naturally." There was a sudden crack. It was a small sound, but it provoked a wave of curious silence. One of the Red Crescent men had stepped into a soft part of the sand, and his foot had encountered something hard, which had splintered. Ibrahim went over, shouting, "Nobody move!" Surprisingly, everyone obeyed. The man had already lifted his foot out of the sand, and Ibrahim could see from his face what he'd found. That sounded like a bone. It was. The depression where the man's shoe had been was filling with sand. Ibrahim caught sight of what might have been another face. They were 5 meters away from the original body. "Everyone stay exactly where you are," Ibrahim boomed, "except for you." He pointed at the forensics photographer. "Take photos of everyone, exactly where they are now." The men scrambled to action. Then Ibrahim pointed to Daher. "Get the local guy to radio in a request for some trackers, Mura, if you can get them, as fast as possible." Daher jogged to the cop car, where Hattab was enjoying the air conditioning. Ibrahim stood guard, his gaze challenging anyone to move so much as a millimeter. Like children in a game, they stood awkwardly frozen, their faces throwing off the burden of heat and now alive with expectation, the strange delight of being told what to do when it actually counted. Thanks.